Hello, and welcome to the Table and Well podcast. I'm Tennison.
And I'm Ginelle. Thank you for joining us as we discuss topics and give practical tools that help you live, grow, and be in healthy, joy-filled relationship with God, yourself, and others.
For more information and resources, or if you're looking for coaching, connection, and community, visit tableandwell.org. We hope you enjoy this podcast. Hello again, and welcome to the Table and Well podcast. This is episode number 15 of season 3 of our maturity series, and we are still in the parent stage of maturity. And our last podcast, we went through the adult parent, or the adult parent. They are adult parents, hopefully. The parent stage task that need to be accomplished to be fully mature in that stage of maturity. And so we're going to move into a space of singles, not single parents, but singles as parents. So how do you practice, or how do you grow in this stage of maturity if you don't have children?
Right. Yeah, and I think singles might not be a good word here. It's really about that non-biological adult parenting children.
Yes.
Right? Parenting people in younger maturity stages than them.
Mm-hmm.
So that could look like an aunt, an uncle. It could look like a youth group leader. It could look like a mentor, and being that when you've reached this stage.
Yeah.
Now remember, this isn't about a age. So it really is about having your first child kind of propels you into this parent stage of maturity. So when that isn't happening, when that hasn't happened physically, then how do you get here?
Yeah.
And I would say that you get here first by being a mature adult.
Yes.
And having done your first 3 stages of maturity.
Right.
When we see people enter the stage that have not biologically produced, I don't know another way to say that. I mean, adoption could create this space. Yep. Blended families could create this space. Absolutely. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say it's just a matter of, like,
you're a 26, 28-year-old single man, single woman.
Right. And how do you move into parent maturity? Yeah. And I already kind of named some things of what those can be, but it really is important that your maturity is shored up. Yes. I would really, really encourage you not to try to explore this phase until you have done that. If there's not a reason for you to be here, do your due diligence before you choose to try to parent others. I think there's also something really important here in that I think we can get this misconstrued in the way that we think, especially when we use the word leader, that
that's good.
That we think it looks like parenting our peers, and that is not going to work out for anybody. Yes. You may carry a lot of intrinsic parenting skill because of your childhood and you having to parent young, pseudo-maturity, that you unfortunately were made to fill the parent role long before it was ever your appropriate age and time. So you may find yourself stepping in to spaces like this, and you're a natural leader, and you naturally parent other people, and then you're parenting your peers, and it ends up a lot of your relationships are really unbalanced, or you're creating a lot of pain for yourself and for others. Yeah. It's important that you know how to have a mutually satisfying relationship with your peers prior to providing this parent stage. Yeah. And when you begin to function as a parent in your community to people who are younger than you, and I would say significantly younger, 10 to 15 years minimum. Yes. And I would say I would much more encourage toward the 15 years that, now I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Yeah, that you just are ready to do this well, because it's going to be a bit more challenging. It's not that like being handed an infant isn't hard. Right, for sure. It doesn't call a lot of amazing things out of us, but we're handed infants, right? Like we're handed these little things that
they don't talk back. Right. And they don't have opinions. Well, they do, but they can't express them.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so God gives us the gift of growing through parent maturity by giving us a little baby that just needs basic physical care and doesn't need emotional or relational care just yet. And then that slowly gets handed to us, and then we grow through that. So when we have someone who didn't get an infant and is wanting to and needing to appropriately step into this parent phase, oftentimes they're handed a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or someone who needs you to be able to relationally show up well. And so having solidified your other stages of maturity and the foundation is so critical here. Otherwise,
it just doesn't go well.
It just doesn't.
It doesn't go well because you are, again, you're trying to. It comes from really bad.
Well, and you just haven't been given a good on-ramp, right? No, and so it may even be something well worth considering that if you're in this space, go volunteer in the nursery or with other families that have babies and hold them and learn what it's like to have them puke on you.
And nurture and care
and learn
for
how to
that way.
nurture and care for, and go on a family outing with somebody who has a toddler and realize just how challenging it is.
Yeah,
and how you have to think of 32 things and pack all the things and think about that child's needs long before you step out the door.
Actually really, really good.
Because that's part of the sacrificing, right? Like, you can't expect that toddler to show up prepared. You have to create the preparation, the protection. Our son and his family are coming in town in a couple weeks, and we're wanting to go out and have fun. And they have a 2.5-year-old and a 3-month-old.
And so we have to think through.
We're staying really conscious of, oh gosh, it's an 1.5-hour drive, and then we'd want to spend 3 to 4 hours there, and then it's an 1.5-hour drive back.
Here, and
nap time happens at this time.
Feeding is here. And
and he needs to be fed every whatever hours. And so what would that be like for mom? And are we setting her up for success? Are we setting that toddler up for success? Are we expecting them just to figure it out?
Right, to roll with it.
And so as someone who might be stepping into this parent maturity stage, maybe think about that, of what does it look like to be an active member of my community with those littles. Yeah. And this conversation also could be, and I think we'll just sprinkle it in here, but, women, it seems like women would have a lot more opportunity to do this, and that it would feel safer for women to be a part of a community or caring for infants or caring for toddlers. There's a lot of concern around men having access to children and that being a reality. So let's sprinkle in here a little bit about what it looks like to make this appropriate, because if men do not grow into this stage naturally, biologically,
right, when they become married and parents of their own children.
Well, I'm saying if they don't, then we have a bunch of men in our society that are stunted and do not know how to lead well. They're often handed leadership positions, but don't know how to love and care sacrificially because they haven't had the practice with a drooling
I missed where you were going with that, and now it's hit me, and that's
right?
Really good.
Like, I think I want to say I'm aware of the challenges. I also want to say, I kind of like we talked about in the last podcast, that doesn't mean we avoid this.
Right.
Because we all lose if we don't have men functioning in parent maturity because they have not biologically reproduced. Because we also have an epidemic of men who have biologically reproduced.
Who are not.
And who are not parents.
Yes.
Do not know how to be fathers. Do not have the skill of that.
Yeah.
And where is that learned where is it learned
Yeah. So, wow, that's really good. So, that's great. It's not in our notes, so we're flying off the cuff here, which is good though. But I think
we can weave it into this conversation. I think it's worth mentioning here up front.
Yep.
Because I think people may dismiss this conversation by disqualifying.
Yeah. No, that's really good.
Okay.
All
so
right.
let's talk about the 3 types of parents that are, gosh, we need to come up with a better word than singles, but
I know.
Non-biological parents. That sounds terrible too.
That sounds terrible too. I don't know, but we'll keep trying it throughout the podcast, and let us know. Let us know in the comments which one works best for you.
3 types of adults who are operating in parent maturity and role in the community. Maybe operating in a parent role.
There you go.
So 3 types. There's a supplemental type, which they assist with training, introduction to the community, and protection. All of us regardless,
should be operating in this space.
Should be operating in this space.
I was going to say could, but no, we should be operating in this space, because this provides safety for our community, provides safety for for other families. I mean, could you imagine what it would be like to live in a community where you know that all the adults, single, non-single, are healthy, mature, and they're looking out for the protection of the community?
Yes. And for the children, making sure that those children feel like they belong, that introduction to the community, that those children feel protected by all of us.
Right.
That I am also contributing to raising them up in maturity and in skill and in training. The second type is a stand-in. So when a parent is unable to be available for whatever reason at given times. And so this could look like a blended family. This could look like
parents.
This could look like a foster parent. Yes. This could look like a parent being unavailable for a time, whether that's because of incarceration or because of hospitalization or
military. They go overseas, and the mom is gone or the dad is gone, and so there's someone who can, again, an aunt, an uncle, a family friend who can stand in as that figure. That in that role while the other parent is gone. Right.
This could look like a loss of a parent.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's the third type, which is replacement. So when there's a permanent loss of a parent.
Yeah.
And that could look like, again, a blended family, which is a bit more permanent replacement.
Yep.
But it could look like also that you see someone has lost their father and you can step in as a father figure.
Yeah.
I think this one kind of blends together in my mind with replacement and stand-in of I'm going to stand into that space until maybe your mother gets remarried or there's another father provided. But
this one's interesting to me too, because I think this one, the replacement, actually could take the most development of all the other skills of infant, child, and adult, because to honestly be a replacement parent, like for instance, you could have a blended family, and you could be a stand-in parent, but there's a difference when you become a replacement parent. That is actually that child has now accepted you as the replacement.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
It's not just powerful. You walking in being a replacement.
Right.
In the beginning, you're a stand-in.
Right, that's true.
For that role.
Right.
And then, as you have grown in your maturity skills, and you are protecting, providing, in whatever role that is, and you are teaching maturity and growing, and now this child, however old they are, feels safe and connected to you, but they feel like they belong, and you're helping infuse identity into them, then that child then accepts you as the replacement parent.
You're right.
That's a whole nother level.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about attachment along the way within our podcast, but attachment comes into play here of being a secure attachment.
Yes.
And there's a lot of components to what that looks like, but I think your point is so good in the way that not only do I feel attached to you as a stand-in, but now I'm actually choosing you as a bonded partner for life. And that is a different thing than, okay, you're here to fill a role, and I see that, and I feel safe, and that feels stable to me. But now I'm actually choosing to be bonded to you for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. So we'll maybe come back to that. There's something else there too, but I don't have it right now. But so non-biological. This is what we called them. Was that the word that we used? I don't remember what we even said.
People filling a
role, the role of parent,
role of a parent.
Thank you.
In the community.
In the community as spiritual parents.
Yes. Okay.
All that to say, and so what that looks like is, so God is the one who calls you to this.
Well, clarify, because that was a lot of words.
It was.
But filling the role of a parent as a spiritual parent. Like, what does it mean to be a spiritual parent when we say that? Like, what even is that?
Yeah. So the first point in there was that God is the one who has called you to do this. He has, again, we're family. And even the language of heaven is family. And so mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, spiritual parents, all of that, born again, even that's at the very beginning. I really feel like this is something that that God has designed for his family to be healthy and safe and growing. And so just understand that. It doesn't, I also say that this kind of also goes back to that same thing I said with the replacement. You don't just walk up to someone and say, I'm your spiritual parent.
Right.
That doesn't quite work.
No.
There needs to be some sort of rapport, some sort of connection where it becomes an agreed on thing, a mutual understanding of this is what's happening.
And I think that's built over time with you being like a parent and caring like a parent and loving like a parent would love, and then it develops into something that is a mutual fit. Right. Like when anybody walks up and says, I'm now your spiritual parent, like mayday, mayday.
Right. That's like saying God said that we were going to get married.
Right. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Right.
All of these are relationships that are grown into.
Yeah. I think it's a really important point too here. It needs to be done as part of community.
Oh, yes.
It's not you out on your own doing pulling other people in to kind of have your own thing. It needs to be done inside of community.
It should not be isolating.
Never isolating.
Yes. If it's isolating, that is, again, a red flag.
Yeah. And again, I think, God designed is for us to live in community. And so this role should be walked out in community as well. I think is really important for that. This point here, focus on same gender. I believe that's really important because, as we said before, only men can call boys into manhood and only women can call girls into womanhood. And that's something that happens in that adult stage that we talk about. You bestowed manhood or womanhood onto a boy or girl. So the intimacy part, because this is actually a very intimate thing too, being someone's spiritual parent, it's not just a flippant thing where I'm going to teach you how to read the Bible and pray and do all of that. It is an intimate connection, because I think in this space too, it's all of the things. It also involves emotional connection. It also involves helping people regulate their emotions and how to express how they're feeling.
Right, yeah, because remember all the tasks that we talked about and the needs, like these are all in play in this conversation. When I'm operating in the role of a parent with someone who is not my child, I'm still operating and I'm still doing all the things that are my part to do as a parent with them. Yeah. Yeah, another thing to keep in mind here that I think is important is focusing on your same gender, like you said, men calling out boys into manhood and women into womanhood. I think, again, I talked about this in the last podcast, of the reality of this feeling potentially really unsafe. Yeah. You know, that I don't feel comfortable with my child hanging out with another man, my son hanging out with another man that I may not know well. And this is why community plays a role here. Yeah. And bonding plays into this too. And bonding, our bonding circuits are located right next to our sexual circuits. So there can be that intimacy that you're talking about can be, when people are not healthy, it's a recipe for disaster. Let's just be honest. Like, and you can look anywhere and see this happening. This is not a secret anymore. This is not an unknown thing anymore. This is an everyday, sadly, and almost an everyday reality. However, what we don't want to see happening is that we then put up so many protection mechanisms that boys don't know what it is to be poured into by other men. Yes. Besides my own father, especially if I don't have a father, right? Like, or what it looks like for women to be pouring into girls. Yeah. You know, especially if I don't have a mother. How do we create safety while this is occurring? And really community is the
community
key
is the key to that.
So that what we're not, again, I feel like half of our podcast is me saying what we're not saying. but I think it's like, it's important to me that we're explaining something that is so powerful and so possible and so full of growth and possibility and a shift in this world relationally, right? And in family and getting back to family. What does it look like to get back to real, deep, loving, safe family? It looks like at this point in time on the earth, it likely does not look like intimate time alone. Yes. it likely very much looks like I am going to offer a role of parenting to you that is among the community while we're all together. Like I can sow a lot into a child and never be alone with them.
Yeah.
We can do activities together that a community is doing together. We could do, I can teach you things that are not alone in a room together. There's so much. I mean, I don't want to spell it all out or create triggering, but there's common sense that could be used here too within the community context.
Yes.
And I just want to be really clear that what we're not saying is like, hey, go find a guy and connect him with your son and like wish them well. Right. What we are saying is if you're in this space, even for you, even if you have a ton of maturity, don't set yourself up into a situation that could create lots of questions either. Go ahead and offer this to your community while staying connected in the presence of the community.
Well, and I think inside of that too, you made a very good point about it's the modeling piece. Like you can model what it looks like to do this, or this is, or that the idea of when we even talked about the disciplining in love, the healthy correction piece that we talked about in our last podcast. It's the idea too, in a community space, you can always remind the community of who we are, and this is what we do. Right. And so in that way, yes, you are being a spiritual parent in that. And then so it looks like dads and sons go on a weekend or whatnot, and then the quote unquote single guys go with them. Right. And learn what it looks like, which is kind of that next point on there, but talk about parent coaching. But it's this idea where you go and now you're learning, you're modeling, you're seeing what it looks like for dads to talk to their boys and in a community setting. Right. And then you're being invited into that space. Right. And you're inviting others into that space. Right. Again, in the context of community. Right.
It could look like two dudes going fishing together and one of them has a son.
And the other guy does, yeah.
Or they just had a baby and it looks like we're going to hang out together tonight while the girls go out, but we're keeping the kids,
Yeah.
And we're hanging out together, but I'm also going to watch you as a dad take care of your toddler and feed them and negotiate with them.
Could you negotiate? So true. Oh, our granddaughter. But it's the idea, but it is that's so good because we don't. Where can we do that? Where can a single guy actually see what it looks like and see what it is and have it modeled in front of them what it looks like for a dad to care for his 3-week-old?
Right. Or maybe even try it on myself. Like maybe me being the guy, the guy friend, like maybe I'm holding the baby.
Yeah.
And feeding it the bottle. Maybe you're not doing that. Maybe as a dad, you're showing me how to do that. Like those are
inviting you into that
safe
space.
Ways that I can learn how to be. I can learn how to be a father without it being unsafe for anyone or without it being unhealthy or inappropriate for anyone.
Yeah.
And yet calling out this beauty within men and beauty within women that is meant to be awakened. Yeah. So that our communities can be the family they're meant to be. There is still a way to do it that is a win.
Yep. And community is the key.
And community is the key. So one thing I want to talk about before we move on is that we're kind of talking about this in the context of like, I think we've kind of alluded to like these 20 to 30-year-olds,
sure.
Being in community and not having had children yet, but having the practice of moving into this role and growing in this role.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about is spiritual parents often too, like there's no age limit to practicing this or having spiritual parents in our lives. And we're going to talk about here in a few podcasts about the elder stage of maturity and having people who are further down the road than us. We still need these people in our lives to parent us. So what I'm saying is that this concept of functioning in a parent role doesn't have an expiration date, just like it doesn't in real life.
That's good. Yep.
And 60-year-olds can be, and maybe they're just now coming into this space, right? Yeah. Like 60-year-olds might be saying, gosh, I've never really functioned fully in this parent stage, or I've not functioned in it well, and I actually have lost my relationship with my children because of it. And I want to learn how to do it right.
Yeah.
Or I want to learn how to repair this. I want to fulfill this role in my community.
Yep.
I just want to say that is so valuable, that what we're not, that I was going to say what we're not saying. What I want whoever is listening to realize that this is a lifelong calling, just like every other stage of maturity. As we master it, as we grow in it, it's a lifelong invitation of operating as a parent in our community that does not end once it begins. And so this is not a dismissal of those that are older. And really, when we think about the concept of salvation, you had mentioned being born again.
Right.
And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but if it's true that the concept of salvation, and Scripture uses the language of being born again,
right,
that means we get to be infants again.
Again, right.
Well, who's parenting us, right? And
Exactly.
So we talk about God our Father, and I get that. Totally understand that. Jesus is our brother. Like, I get that. And who is going to model for us what it's like to be a Christ follower, to look like him, if no one's parenting us through that? No one's helping us mature through infancy and through childhood through adolescence and through adulthood in these same phases. If you take the maturity model and you overlay it over
spiritual growth,
and we talk about discipleship.
Yep.
We should be doing these exact same things in the spiritual context as we are in the natural context.
100%.
And I just have to mention that here because it is so paramount to us as a family of God that if I think if someone gives their life to the Lord and they're an infant, then I could be spiritually parenting them well, right? Like, that makes complete sense. Like, we don't have to just be talking about ages here. We could be talking about stages of life. And now, if I'm 30 and that person is 25, I could be spiritually parenting them through their spiritual walk.
Yes.
But I'm not going to be parenting them through life. That's where some of that gets a bit unhealthy. But just keep in mind that this is a perfect overlay for what it should look like for us to disciple one another. Yeah,
unfortunately, what tends to happen in that space is someone does come to the Lord, and then we expect them to be adults right away, and we give them adult responsibilities, and we talk to them like they're an adult, and we expect them to navigate their spiritual up and downs as an adult.
Right.
And then we are like frustrated with them because whatever. You would not be frustrated with your 2-year-old if they don't know how to cook lunch yet.
Right. Or your 3-year-old who asks why 1,000 times a day. If somebody's spiritually asking why 1,000 times a day, it's because they're developmentally growing through their own spiritual walk. And we talk about this too, that, so often people are thrown out of the church, quote unquote, because they reach
the adult stage.
Yeah, well, that space between child and adult where they're in adolescence and they're challenging everything that they've ever been told. As they would developmentally appropriately. That's what drives parents crazy about teenagers. Is they're like, why do they have to
question everything I say?
Right, or they
think they know it all, or
they challenge everything I say, and there's this great despair on behalf of the parent, and this happens in the
church as well.
in the family of God as well. Is that as people mature spiritually, they're going to get to a phase where they're going to question everything that they've ever been told. And they are going to decide for themselves what is true. And it's going to become their own belief system, their own belief system and their own identity choices. Whereas it's not going to become what everybody else said it was anymore. And that's really, really, really healthy. Really that's how we get to adulthood, is that we own our own personhood.
Right. We become our own self. We have our identity within ourselves.
Right. And so then we operate in the world with our own personhood.
Yes.
And if we're stunting that in the spiritual and in the family of God, then no wonder why we can't function together as family.
Right.
Because nobody's being given permission and being blessed and being raised up. Remember, the job of a parent is to raise up in maturity.
Yes.
And if we're not partnering with that in the family of God, then we're frustrated that everybody's immature and creating lots of damage. And
yeah.
Anyway, soapbox ended, but this plays in so huge.
Yeah.
Let this just marinate within you and think about how this all plays in as we're talking about the tangible, physical, what it looks like to have a parent role, and operate in parent maturity. Overlay it into the family of God. It's extra fun.
It is extra fun. All right, so.
Are you ready? You want me to move on?
Let's do it. Well. Go.
Yes. Okay, so
Real quick.
Mature parents are full of the life skills and maturity that they have learned up until this point that they joyfully desire to offer to the next generation, even if it costs them the ability to take care of themselves well.
Yes.
Remember.
Yes.
This is not in every facet. You should have your bucket full as you're pouring out, and there should be sources pouring into your bucket. So even if you pour out more than you're getting back from that particular relationship because you're functioning in a parent role, that's okay.
Right.
If you don't have a full bucket and you're trying to pour out of an empty one, it will not end well for you.
No, it is, again, it's not to your detriment, but it is to the growing up of the ones that you're taking care of. Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Mature parents are more than eager for the next generation to go beyond them. We love to talk about it like creating a passing lane. There's such a great visual of, if my goal is to keep everybody behind me so I can remain in the lead, I'm not functioning as a mature parent.
No.
Mature parents are aware that they cannot provide everything their children will need and allow opportunities for others to come alongside their child.
Yeah, that's so, so good. Again, guys, it takes a community to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child. And again, understanding that we don't know it all, have it all, can be it all is wisdom. Yeah. In our next podcast, we will be talking about the obvious holes, the obvious immaturity spaces that you'll see in parents if they have not fully matured in this stage of maturity. You've been listening to the Table and Well podcast. New episodes stream every Tuesday. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review to let us know. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to stay up to date on all things Table and Well. To learn more, start your journey, or get information on how Table and Well can help develop your community, family, or teams to be relationally healthy and authentically connected, please go to tableandwell.org/collab to schedule an interest call, or you can email us directly at known@tableandwell.org.